Hello everyone, this is Jim Pikarski, and I teach meditation and give Dharma talks at the Blue Lotus Meditation Center here in Venice, Florida. Today we're going to talk about overcoming fear. Overcoming fear is essential on the spiritual path. Fear is a manifestation of the ego and holds us back. It distorts our vision. And one thing about spirituality is we want our vision to be clear. Fear is a basic instinct. There's no problem with fear when it's an actual response to a physical threat. Then instinct is working well. It's protecting our body, and that's what fear is essentially for. It's to protect our body, to protect us physically. So if we're walking down the street and a car comes up on the sidewalk and looks like it's going to hit us, then it's normal for our fear to kick in and our fight or flight instinct to kick in too. So we get out of the way. But the problem is that fear gets associated with our ego. And then we become afraid of things that are not physically threatening. They just threaten our ego. Become afraid of being embarrassed, not succeeding, rejection, poverty, losing respect from others. These are not physical dangers. These are mental. And because they're mental, they're irrational. We imagine something bad happening in the future. And the future is a mental concept. So, in an imaginary future, we worry about something imaginary that is going to happen. And this is the basis of psychological fear. So it exists in our imagination. It's not a response to actual physical threats. Meditation can be helpful in eliminating fear. In the book Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn, he talked about people meditating and overcoming a lot of their fears and a lot of their serious agoraphobic and phobic problems. Cognitive behavioral therapy in psychotherapy says that all fear is due to catastrophic thoughts. Catastrophic thoughts are basically negative thoughts about the future. We have fear that something bad is going to happen. This creates irrational fear. We develop a scenario that we think will happen. We deem that outcome as catastrophic, and then we worry about this. Once we create this thought of a terrible outcome, we tend to believe it will happen, or we fear that it will happen. And all this creates fear and worry and can create a lot of tension and stress for ourselves, and it's unnecessary. Very few of our fears are actually in the moment. This makes most of them irrational. How many fears are actual where you're physically threatened or you could be hurt in some way? These are when fear is working in the proper way. The only way to overcome fear is to face it. If we don't face fear, then we really can't learn from the situation, and we can't really get rid of the fear because we'll never know if we can face it. When we face fear, and it's an irrational fear, we understand that the consequences were typically not as bad as we thought they were. They're only bad, the consequences, if we get lost into more fears and our mind keeps going. But it's just continued irrationality. So to overcome fear, we really need to question our catastrophic thoughts. We need to be mindful of the emotion of fear itself. Fear can trigger very strong emotions, and some of these can be physical sensations of panic. And these can be very difficult to face, because when we face them, we can trigger more catastrophic thoughts. For instance, a panic attack. Thoughts trigger fear, and this triggers more thoughts, which triggers more fear, and the next thing our bodies are reacting to it, and we're experiencing this fear in our body. So it promotes a cascade of thought and emotion that becomes very physical. So fear has basically three parts of it. It has the thoughts about it. It has the physical reaction. Let's take the physical reaction. It's based upon fight, flight, or freeze. And we can hyperventilate and have other physical reactions when we're frightened. So one thing you can do is to deal with fear, you can do the exact opposite of what the fear is telling you to do. So if you're hyperventilating, you can just breathe slowly and easily. So you're going directly against the fear. And this is basically the way we overcome fear, by going directly against it. If we're in a difficult situation, instead of running away and avoiding it, we face it. And by facing it, we get through it, and we realize that we made it through. And because we made it through, the catastrophic belief in our mind is diminished. Also with the emotion, the emotion is going through our body of fear. We need to be mindful of it. And we need to make sure the emotion doesn't trigger more fearful thoughts, because what happens is that the cascade is the catastrophic thought, then the emotion, and then we can feel the fear in our body, and then it creates more catastrophic thoughts, and that can eventually lead to a panic attack. So with emotion, we just need to stay with it. We need to stay with the fear and the emotion and not create a secondary response to it, and just stay with it until the fear dissipates. The third thing we can do is deal with our thoughts and beliefs. We can question our distorted thoughts, question this whole tendency to catastrophize, and see that the fear is based upon this catastrophizing. And then we question these beliefs. And is it really going to be that bad? What makes me think so? There are two basic ways that people face fears. Some people face fears by jumping right into the situation. There are certain fears you can only face that way. For instance, you're going to jump off a ski jump. You just have to go with it and see what happens. Or you're going to jump out of a plane with a parachute. You just have to face it. You just jump, because there's no way of doing it gradually. And that's the other way, gradual exposure it's called. Most fears can be handled this way, and it's kind of the safer way, and it's more gradual, and it's less overwhelming. So we do things a little at a time. So if you're afraid of going outside, you're agoraphobic, you go out to your porch, you get used to being on your porch, then you go to your lawn and sit on your lawn a little bit and get used to that, and then you go out to the street, and then the next thing you may do is take a walk around the block. But each time you're doing it long enough that you can expose yourself to it, because it's called gradual exposure. So you gradually expose yourself to these, you get used to them, and you realize the fear, nothing bad happened. Some things it's very hard to do gradually, like fear of flying. Some people are afraid of flying. So we can expose ourselves gradually in our own mind by imagining what it's like to get on a plane. At one point I was afraid of an accident. I heard that most accidents occur when planes were taking off. So I would get anxious when the plane was taking off, and I realized that I didn't want to deal with that. So what I did is I would imagine that the plane blew up, and everything I would experience in my imagination, because what I wanted to do was face it. And once I faced it and faced as many feelings as I could provoke in myself just through imagination, it disappeared. So most people benefit from working on it gradually, a little bit at a time. Now, in spiritual development, irrational fear is one of the many delusions to overcome. And it needs to be eradicated completely, because in spiritual development, you're really looking to, hopefully, to be enlightened. And our wholeness depends upon it. When you're afraid of something, what happens is that you take that part and you push it away. And when you push it away, what you're creating is a bifurcation in your own psyche. You're creating a conflict within your own psyche. And that conflict drains you of energy. And you avoid that. Some people are afraid of their feelings. Some people are afraid of what they think. All that stuff needs to be explored. We can, if we're afraid of our own inadequacy, we might project it outward and then judge other people. So it creates all kinds of problems when we don't deal with our fear. And a divided psyche cannot give us wholeness. The ego and the conditioned mind are responsible for our fears. When our true nature is not afraid of anything, it doesn't experience fear. It inhibits self-realization. And a lot of times when people are further along on the spiritual path, they have to face deep questions about the reality of their own ego and their self. And this can bring up all kinds of fears. And it's good to have had some practice in being able to face your fears. Otherwise, you may come to that point and you can be overwhelmed by the fears that may provoke. Courage is a fundamental quality of our true nature. Our true nature is beyond harm. It's beyond conditions. And so what we want to do is we want to train our mind to be in line with our true nature rather than the ego. And the ego is the source of all our fears. Thank you.